we're looking at how the Snowden affair, the national intelligence whistleblower from the United States, has suddenly taken a British twist with the detention for 9 hours on Sunday of the partner of one of the journalists who's been writing up Snowden's story. This was in transit at Heathrow Airport as he was making his way back to Brazil. With us to talk about it from London is Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn. Joining us from Washington is Joshua Faust, journalist and columnist. Here in the studio, we're pleased to welcome back Francis Picard of the French chapter of Amnesty International, Guillaume Gralet, tech reporter for French news weekly Le Point, and Ellen Wasselina, who is security analyst for, well, how do we put this? Security analyst for the Black Sea and the whole of Eastern Europe.
Yeah, right. Mediterranean Black Sea. Area.
Mediterranean Black Sea. Now, we were discussing at the end of part one the issue of how much what were the motivations behind the British decision, and also there was the dig made by Jeremy Corbyn at the beginning, wondering aloud over whether or not the UK was doing this on its own, or either in collusion or under the how should we put this, instruction of the United States. Back at the start of the month, The Guardian published another story that shows British intelligence got £100 million in payments for intelligence gathered over 3 years, and there's more. In its report, it found that 60% of the UK's high-value intelligence is based on either NSA end product or derived from NSA collection. And product means official reports that are distillations of the best raw intelligence. Now, if you add that story to Miranda's 9 hours in custody, many in Britain this Tuesday are recalling images of the start of the Iraq War when the Daily Mirror branded the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair, as George Bush's poodle. That nickname haunted Blair throughout the rest of his tenure in office. Now, Banks's cartoon in the Financial Times today puts it otherwise. There you see the man asking, our man in Washington wants to know what you have to say to our man in London, basically, and that is how the story has been playing out. But Jeremy Corbyn, there was reacting to that other story in The Guardian. Whitehall reacted by saying, the fact is there is a close intelligence relationship between the UK and the US, but also between a number of other countries, including Australia and Canada. There's no automaticity, nor is everything shared.
Well, we don't know the answer to that question. All we know is there is a very close relationship. There is a sharing of databases and a great deal of information. There is an incredible ease by which the US can extract anyone from British jurisdiction and take them to the USA and put them on trial. It's very hard to find things happening in the other direction. And it seems that we have this sort of extension of the US paranoia about security spread out across the world since 9/11. And I think this is just another example of that degree of paranoia. But this is frankly, harassment of the partner of a journalist who happens to be travelling through Heathrow Airport. And I think it's part of the US anger at Snowden. And those that condemn Snowden should think for a moment, this is a man who made a very big personal decision, obviously at variance with his general approach to politics and life in the past. He decided that enough was enough, and he wasn't prepared to go any further with this kind of thing because he could see what the US intelligence service was actually doing and the degree of surveillance that it was carrying out against not just the people in the USA, but the people all over the world. So I think this is a salutary lesson for all of us that we want to be able to lead our own lives freely. We don't want to all be under state surveillance all the time. It's what the US and West used to complain about over the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc. This is far greater than any surveillance that ever happened in the Soviet Bloc era.
Joshua Faust, do you agree?
Actually, I think quite the opposite. In contrast to what Mr. Corbyn was saying, GCHQ and Whitehall have agency in their own decisions. A child could read the stories that The Guardian has posted and the statements that Mr. Greenwald has made in the press, that he has sent documents to his partner, that Ms. Poitras uses companions and has other people carry her electronics through airport security, and piece that together and wonder if someone so closely related to both was involved and want to flag them for removal. It doesn't take a lot of effort to figure this out if you're an intelligence analyst, and anyone reading the press could find that out. Looking more broadly, the question about whether or not Edward Snowden is a whistleblower is immaterial to the Miranda decision. If you're involved in trafficking stolen top secret documents across national borders, government agencies are going to treat that seriously, regardless of the contents of the message and the rightness of whether or not those were leaked, because governments take secrecy seriously. And pretending like they don't or that they shouldn't, I think, is to completely misunderstand the reason why there's a national security apparatus in every developed country on the planet, and why it exists, and why their governments continue to support it. They're elected governments, it's important to say. And as for the allegation that NSA surveillance is bigger than anything in the Soviet Union, yeah, so's the internet, which didn't exist during most of the Soviet Union. So are cell phones, which didn't exist during the Soviet Union. That's a little bit of pedantry considering how much our communication standards have changed. The question of whether the surveillance is actually used for political suppression, to suppress speech, the fact that we're talking about this in London, in DC, in the EU, I think says that that's utter nonsense, the same way that the Soviets would use their surveillance apparatus to crack down, imprison, and psychologically drug their dissidents. We've done nothing of the sort, despite the heated rhetoric, and bringing it into that realm, I think, is really toxic to any kind of rational debate.
Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, you might ask yourself what's happening in Guantanamo Bay, for example, where there is the most grotesque denial of human rights, civil liberties, rule of law, and anything else, and that's gone on ever since 9/11. You might also ask yourself the question, if Britain was so keen on detaining Mr. Miranda for the maximum period they could without charging him, why didn't Germany do something about it? Because he was travelling from Germany, he'd been staying at an address in Germany with somebody that presumably is fairly well known in Germany. The Germans decided no, that there wasn't a problem here. It seems to me that there is a very over-keen interest by the US state as a whole to end any public discussion about Snowden and any public discussion about this degree of surveillance that's gone. And it's backfired very badly on them as a result of this ham-fisted thing that was done at Heathrow.
I want to bring up one point, Francis Perrin, that Joshua Faust made, which is, as the Romans would put it, the law is harsh, but it's the law. In this case, there could be the law being broken.
Yes, but it's not enough. We must go deeper.
So in this case, breaking the law is okay?
Yes, I would say, I would put it in another way. Mr. Snowden contributed to expose details about programs led by the US government. These programs constituted and constitute massive, sweeping, and systematic invasions into the right to privacy.
Which has been known since
So
1978.
he acted into the public interest. And he did this with taking great personal risk. So the US government seems more interested in persecuting Mr. Snowden than in addressing the fundamental issues he exposed. The fact that these programs are at least partly unlawful in terms of international human rights law and US law and US Constitution. So, of course, the US government is not very happy with this because he tried to hide these programs, the details about this, the massive invasions into the right of privacy. They are exposed throughout the world, and it's easier for them to try to hide Mr. Snowden and to disturb and harass other people than to go to the fundamentals of this issue. And as far as this is concerned, Mr. Obama's recent speech was very weak there were some advances about the foreign the surveillance court and about more transparency as far as the NSA is concerned. But it was very weak and very timid, and we urge the US government and other governments to really be serious in addressing human rights issues rather than playing politics with this.
All right, Miranda's partner, Glenn Greenwald, by the way, reacting with a touch of fury and you could say even menace to all of this.
I will be far more aggressive in my reporting from now on. I'm going to publish many more documents. I am going to publish things on the United Kingdom too. I have many documents on the United Kingdom spying system. They're going to regret what they've done.
Hell hath no fury. More seriously though, what's going to be the upshot of that?
Yeah, it may have lots of things. We've seen many surprises in the last few weeks. What I'm most surprised of is we speak about two sides, basically the whistleblower sides and the US and UK government. But there is another portion of people which are basically the citizens, and the citizens were surprised about what they learned from the prison surveillance.
Were you surprised?
I was surprised.
Even though you covered these issues and you've even been out to Utah to see the building of that.
Yeah, I've been to Utah to see the NSA building, but I was surprised about the massive state of surveillance and all the means that have been put on this. I would say the law is good when the citizen think the law is good, and I wouldn't say that the state before was not with computers, etc. There have been some very famous and good hackers in the past, even in Britain. For example, Alan Turing. He helped the British government during the Second World War to fight against Germany, and that was accepted by anyone. That was a good job, a good surveillance job. So the government should explain more what they're doing to the citizen.
All right, and these revelations about just how much of our information is being looked at in terms of what our cell phones, what's inside our cell phones. German Green Party politician Malte Spitz requested and obtained his personal cell phone records over 6 months from Deutsche Telekom. And this graph pinpoints, it's on Die Zeit's website, locates his every movement, every single day of those 6 months, as well as the calls he made. People didn't know about this story before Edward Snowden made his revelations.
But we've
Are
heard
you
this.
still saying?
No, but we've heard this before. I mean, when the first spying started, I'm sorry, it was in 1978 in the AT&T building in San Francisco.
Right,
So
but
these are
Guillaume
not-
here, who follows this on a daily basis, says he was surprised. He was surprised, but you're not?
No, I'm not surprised because, and I've said this before, technology has taken us there. We all have cell phones. I walk around with my cell phone in my purse, and all of this is going to be recorded, and we know that.
Of course, I'm not paranoid, and I love technology. I will still use my cell phone for sure for doing everything with my family. But I'm just saying, other countries, Europe, for example, 29 countries in Europe just ask for more information on that, and they were surprised. And they are allies from the US.
But they also should build their own intelligence network too. That was subject of a Chaillot paper in 1998.
Of course, but I think there were. I don't want to speak for them, but I think they were a bit surprised, and that's what they asked for a meeting with Viviane Reding a few days ago, because
EU commissioner.
Yeah, of course, and they fight for terrorism, but they just want to be more aware about what's going on.
Sure,
Joshua Faust, have you been surprised by some of the revelations of Edward Snowden? Do you look at your cell phone differently?
No, because I knew my cell phone was fundamentally insecure, the same way that I knew my email was fundamentally insecure. This is part of, I think, what comes at the maturation process of understanding what technology has exposed us to. And it's not new. We knew in 1999 from an EU Commission report that the NSA was already monitoring 80% of internet traffic and every single telephone communication in and out of Europe. This isn't new news. I think the extent and the uses to which it's been used matter. But the moment that cell phones were mandated to carry GPS transceivers for 9/11 calls, it was obvious that they were transmitting our position.
And they even transmit it when the telephone is switched.
Metadata.
They even transmit it when the telephone is switched
Yes, they
off.
do. Yes, they do, and you can actually find that language in the specification sheets of these cell phones. People didn't know about it, and I think it's valuable that people know about the fundamental insecurity built into their lives. The old adage, you shouldn't put something on Facebook you don't want the world to see, is true. I don't think people took it seriously until these revelations came out. So in that sense, it's good. But you know, the public interest implications of this, I think, extend just beyond educating the public about the insecurity built into their electronic devices. There was no public interest need to expose GCHQ espionage against Russian agents during the G20 conference. There was no public interest need to expose American espionage against the Chinese government. Those are traditional spying operations. There's no need to make them public. The public isn't safeguarded by exposing them either. So while we're keeping in mind the fact that this one conversation has been catalyzed by Snowden, the fact that so many other legitimate operations, uncontroversial operations, have also been exposed by these documents are important, and they speak to why the government, both governments in the UK and in the US, are treating these leaks so seriously, because it's not just sparking a civil liberties discussion, it's exposing legitimate and uncontroversial spying operations, and that's something they cannot ignore.
Yeah, Joshua, I would say spying is not a bad thing. It's the systematic aspect of it that shocked many people, included.
Correct, which is why it shouldn't be exposed the way it got exposed.
Yeah, Joshua, included. You just spoke about Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg himself wrote a letter to all its users saying that he didn't know the extent of all the NSA surveillance. He apologized. He asked for more information. He met with Barack Obama, as well as Larry Page, the CEO of Google.
Excuse me, the amazing thing is that we all voluntarily go on Facebook.
Yeah,
right?
but Larry...
We expose ourselves.
And that Zuckerberg has famously disregarded every privacy concern of every Facebook user whenever he resets everyone's privacy settings to public to get more marketing dollars. So Zuckerberg's concern is really cute, but it's not terribly credible.
All right, and Francis Perrin was complaining that Barack Obama has paid only lip service so far, he says, to reforming the way we look at all those millions and millions of phone calls. I don't know if they're millions or billions. Back on the 9th of August, the U.S. president went beyond his ongoing call, which remains, to bring Edward Snowden to justice. He promised a review of intelligence gathering.
We can and must be more transparent. So I've directed the intelligence community to make public as much information about these programs as possible. We've already declassified unprecedented information about the NSA, but we can go further. So at my direction, the Department of Justice will make public the legal rationale for the government's collection activities under Section 215 of the Patriot Act. The NSA is taking steps to put in place a full-time civil liberties and privacy officer and released information that details its mission, authorities, and oversight.
Francis Perrin, why does this fall short for you?
Privacy is a human right. It means that if a government, and some governments, wants to put it, to undermine it, they must be able to justify these violations. They must be able to show that it's necessary to protect our rights, and they must do it in a proportionate way. When we are speaking about such massive and sweeping programs, such as the NSA programs we are discussing, I have some difficulty in seeing what the meaning of proportionality means. So clearly, the US government violated its own constitution and laws and international human rights law, and the reaction of President Barack Obama is not enough. We call on the Obama administration to go further down this road. There were some interesting announcements, but it's not enough. And it would be very important to have the details of the decision of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Just a little sidebar on this. There are these surveillance courts. There are closed-door hearings that take place in Congress.
Yes.
What about here in France? What's the procedure here in France? Because we know, for instance, the newspaper Le Monde recently revealed that the French were also doing some cyber snooping abroad. What's the procedure here? Is it the same?
I don't know if... I don't think it's exactly the same. It's not to justify what happens in France. As far as our organization is concerned...
Are there more safeguards or less?
Well, we thanks to Mr. Snowden, we have a great wealth of details about what happened and what happens in the US about these programs. And we know a lot since the beginning of this century about the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and so on, and many other programs which constitute great threats to human rights. We do not have so far the same degree of details as far as France is concerned. Some human rights NGOs are taking this issue recently. I think especially the French League for Human Rights. We are, as far as we are concerned, working especially on the US and the UK now on the strength of these revelations. But clearly, I don't think, on the basis of information we have today, and it's important to stress it, that we have the same massive state apparatus in terms of human rights violations than in the US. But of course, it must be confirmed.
I agree to a certain point, but I wouldn't be that optimistic because French companies have sold surveillance systems abroad in a very large ways. There are some debates today.
Amesis, for instance.
Exactly.
Yes.
Some debates today about the fact to consider is this a weapon or is it not a weapon?
We are following this type of issue.
But again, I would agree with you that the governments are very late about the digital age, and we should consider this very seriously.
All right, and how much of this happens in partnership with the private sector is, of course, another aspect that the Snowden affair has revealed. Snowden himself, who is not a government employee.
Exactly.
I want to thank you, Guillaume Gralet. I also want to thank Francis Perrin, Hélène Moisseline. I want to thank Jeremy Corbyn for joining us from London, Joshua Faust for being with us from Washington. Before we go, I want to say hello to James Creedon, who has our Media Buzz segment for us this Tuesday. James, you were hot on this story yesterday.
Unsurprisingly, we're looking at the same story this evening as well, François, as the debate. And the editorial by Alan Rusbridger is really what's been gathering an awful lot of attention. He's placed the spotlight really on press freedom.
This is the editor of The Guardian.
That's right, press freedom in the UK after that 9-hour detention yesterday of Glenn Greenwald, one of their star journalists. Partners. In any case, what he says is a real threat to the freedom of journalists in the UK. He says that confidentiality of sources is threatened by the security apparatus, that it's worse than in the US, where you have First Amendment protections written in the Constitution, that the British security apparatus they're behaving like dinosaurs, because in any case, material that The Guardian had to destroy, where they had to destroy hard drives, it can be published from the US, it can be published elsewhere, and that they were targeted and repeatedly threatened and pressured by Whitehall and basically government heavies. Now, over at the Daily Telegraph, they're saying, look, The Guardian is going too far with this, because it is their top story for about 48 hours now. They've got about 5 or 6 or 7 lead articles, a live blog, everything. They're just going all out with this. Whereas at the Telegraph, you have to really search for information on the story, and both opinion pieces I found are saying, The Guardian's going too far. Do they think they're above the law? Glenn Greenwald and his partner, etc. So they're taking a very different approach over at the Telegraph. I think to sum it all up...
You sound only slightly surprised.
Oh, it's only slightly surprised. I like this cartoon, which I found on social media as well, on Twitter, about this whole story. Snowden, essentially, the whole notion of liberty in the US and in the UK threatened by Snowden and the fallout of it. You can see a devil's tail peeking out under Lady Liberty.
There's also, you were speaking of leaks and the such, France's first cabinet meeting since the summer recess has brought us a little trove.
That's right. Interior Minister Manuel Valls not at all happy at something that he said at that cabinet meeting today, yesterday leaking in Libération this morning. Basically, immigration policy, a socialist government perhaps looking towards reforming the whole notion of family members joining people with residency rights in France. It's one of those touchy issues that is very divisive. Manuel Valls not at all happy that leaked out. Let's take a listen to what he said to French radio this morning.
What bothers me is that this kind of thing is leaked twisting what I said within the privacy of a cabinet meeting, seeking to damage my reputation, when in fact the meeting itself was wonderful, looking towards the future.
Nice to see an old-style leak.
Right, exactly. But a lot of people unhappy with the content of that leak, Francois. Hashtag Vals Imposter. It has been trending on social media.
Oh dear.
You've got a socialist minister. Basically, the socialist base would be in favour of the whole policy of immigration where family members are allowed to join people with residency rights. So clearly he's trying to play a double game. It's double speak. Remember, this is a guy who in a recent poll was said to basically it said that he could beat Sarkozy in the second round of a presidential election. So he's trying to perhaps appeal to the right wing as well. Was the leak done on purpose? Who knows? All
right, so French politics is back. It looks like it's the end of the summer almost. James Creedon. James Creedon, I want to thank you.
Thanks,
I want to thank our panel, and I want to thank you for joining us here for the France 24 debate.
Almost half of the world's 6,000 languages are at risk of disappearing before the end of the century. In Beyond Business, we'll tell you about the warnings. It would not only amount to a cultural loss, but an economic one as well.
Beyond Business, Saturday, 10:15 a.m. Paris time on France 24. A comprehensive review of the week's most important news for a better understanding of world events. The main international news analysed by top experts.
You are free to choose.
The World This Week, every Friday at 7:10 p.m. Paris time on France 24.